everybody, this is Keelin. You probably know me from Razzball Ambulance Chasers, where you are right now. And in 2024, I'm going to be mixing it up a little, and we're going to be doing some video casts. So welcome to the first one. It's very experimental, but super excited about this. And I do have a guest here that probably looks familiar to you. We have Mike Couillard, also known as Cooley, from Razzball's Cards and Categories, and also from our waiver wire report. You were right. It is hard to say. That comes out on Saturdays right after Ambulance Chasers comes out. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And that waiver wire is a mouthful. It took me a long time to get that down, but I am happy to be here as a part of Ambulance Chasers. And maybe people remember me from when I subbed in for you last summer at one point. So
yeah, on like the biggest injury weekend of the freaking year.
I was the one that broke the Shohei Ohtani UCL injury on Razzball.com on the Saturday after or whatever. But it was a interesting time for you to take a little vacation because it just kind of like really opened up the floodgates for me. I had a good time.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. I know. I think you texted me and I was like, yeah. I don't remember what you said, but I hadn't even known it had happened yet. So I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I was like, oh my God. It was awesome. So thank you for doing that for me. I'm sure it'll happen again at some point, and I'll probably miss something huge again. And that's just how it is sometimes. Cool. So one reason you're joining me today is because you're also a very sad fan of the White Sox. And sad
in the background.
Yeah. Sad participant in the AL Central madness, sadness, badness, all of that. So what we're going to do is talk through a little bit about this year, but kind of looking back on last year. So this will be AL Central specific about injuries. And then after this series, or after this episode, we'll continue on with the series through all the other divisions. But why not start with the saddest first, get it out of the way. So my first kind of question for you, Mike, is when you're thinking about the AL Central this year, although pickings might be kind of slim, who do you think is sort of ripe for a comeback post-injury after last season?
Yeah, and I think there's lots of options here within this division that the Twins have established a really strong pattern of having highly injured rosters over the past few years. And that's where I'm going to go for my comeback person. It's actually a little bit deeper cut than I think maybe people might be expecting off the bat. And that's Chris Paddack from the Twins, a starting pitcher that he was working his way back from Tommy John surgery last year, made it all the way back. So he made the full rehab, pitched for 5 innings in the majors, which is great to see. You want to see a guy get back, and he rehabbed all the way from single A, double A, triple A through the Minnesota system. And the fastball looked great. That he seems to be in full form. The Twins used him in the playoffs as well. So they really have a lot of trust in him. If you recall back in 2019 during Chris Paddack's rookie year, he put up a 3.33 ERA with a 9.8 K9. So that was a really great showing from Chris Paddack. Lots of people fell in love with him. And I think Minnesota has been a great pitching factory over the past couple of years. And I'm excited to see what they'll be able to do in a full season with him. That Paddack is going super late in drafts. So I think he's going to be free for a lot of people in fantasy drafts. And I'm buying him because you're looking at somebody who's going late on I was going to say good team, but good team in relation to the rest of the AL Central. So you're picking up wins. And yeah, Chris Paddack is my guy that I'm looking for here for just injury recovery going into 2024.
Nice. That's exciting. And yeah, it's interesting you bring that up about the Twins, because when I was looking through their roster, I was like, oh my God, there's so many people that just have like these recurring crazy injuries. I didn't go with him for this pick. I went with Vinnie Pasquantino.
Yes.
Ostatini. So I think he's probably a little more on the radar this year. But still, I think he was something like ADP 125. And I think I still feel pretty good about him just because I think, hitting, we'll have to see how it was, but even with his injury, he had like a pretty slightly above average, like 103 WRC plus. And I think what really makes me feel a little more solid about him was his strikeout rate. I think it was like 11.9%. And I think, that I don't know that he'll lose that as much. And I'm hoping his hitting ability will come. I mean, he was doing that while injured. So I think he's only going to kind of go up from there. I am interested to see how he actually goes, though, when it comes to drafting. But yeah, that would be my pick for comeback player. Did you have any sort of like honorable mentions or other thoughts?
I mean, Vinnie Pasquantino, I think some people are trying to use the nickname Italian breakfast for him out there. I know that, but he's also, I mean, he's a fun dude, and he was on my kind of like second pick in terms of after Paddock. I like that lineup in Kansas City this year. It should be a little bit better, and underratedly, it's a good hitters park that we ran into that on my pod cards and categories, that when we were looking at the overall ratings of each park, the Royals have become Kauffman Stadium there has become an offensive stadium. So there's a little bit more helium in those bats than I think people might give them. And the other person I had was Shane Bieber. I'm a little bit torn on Shane Bieber. He's had elbow and shoulder injuries, but he's still Shane Bieber. And you remember that Cy Young season, he's pitching against some real just dogs in this division between the White Sox and the Tigers. Lineup can be a little iffy here and there. And at the end of the day, like, the Royals can have bad days too. So, looking at Shane Bieber, it's really tempting to take him where he's going in draft. I think the price is fair. So anyone else that you were looking at?
Yeah, so I almost put I never know how to say his name, Tarek Skubal.
Yeah, Tarek Skubal. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost put him, and then I was like, well, I guess he was sort of already back.
Yeah.
But I still feel like he's going to continue improving. So I'm pretty excited to see how that turns out for him, and hopefully he will stay. I mean, I think the injury aspect is the only one I'm really afraid of for him, just because, I mean, he hasn't had too many occur, but it's enough that it's like I'm a little frightened. So he was definitely like my I actually put him first, and then I thought about it a little more, and I was like, no, because I'm a little scared.
Yeah, I totally understand that. He was coming off of that elbow surgery, and he's always had a history of elbow problems, but you're hoping, knock on wood, that he's over it, because he's going so high in drafts. It's a very rich draft pick.
Yeah, that is true. And I think, well, it's awesome. I'm like, good for him.
Yeah.
It's also still, to me, just a little too risky. But I think that is a great segue to my next question, which is, who is somebody you're saying sell on this year based on sort of their injury history last year? And that can also include before that.
Yeah, and I'll start with a couple of the guys that I cut in consideration for my actual pick. And Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton, I'm out on them in terms of, people might have thought that's where I was going to go when I was mentioning the Twins in my first pick, but Buxton and Correa, just the injury history is too significant, and you're looking for just a more steady bat or a prospect. I think especially where Correa is going in drafts. Correa is going super late. Everybody's out on him, but I've ridden and experienced the Byron Buxton hype, and it just never works out. As much as you try to dream on it, it's never going to work. But yeah, the actual pick I have here is Triston McKenzie from the Guardians. He did battle an elbow injury last year and got a few innings in at the end, but they were rough. he
Yeah.
didn't look sharp. The control wasn't there. The zip wasn't there. And he was dealing with a sprained UCL, which UCLs don't really heal. And usually I was awaiting all August, September that the news would drop that he'd be going underneath the knife for Tommy John surgery. So it was really impressive that he made it back. But I want no part of where the draft price is on McKenzie, that he's being drafted, you know, as somebody to depend on in fantasy drafts on NFBC right now. So Triston McKenzie, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop still on that Tommy John surgery, and I'm not going to take any part in him. So he's the one that I'm selling and avoiding here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember last year during the ambulance chasers coverage, just week after week being there were not a lot of regular updates beyond like, oh, he's still in the IL, and it was like interesting, and it went on for so long. And I think what you're saying completely makes sense, and I would also be concerned about that. So yeah, so I liked also that you called out Byron Buxton because, I mean, same reasons. And I mean, he's not, no disrespect to him, but he's not getting any younger either.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's just like a lot of ups and downs. Last season was interesting with him because it was like, it really was like a roller coaster a little bit. I did go with the Twins, and to me, I think there are a lot of people who I could say sell about in general, but one that kind of stands out to me that based on injury, despite the hype, I'm still a little nervous about Royce Lewis. I think with a recurrent ACL thing, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see another incident where he hits the wall in the outfield or something and it goes again. So I see a lot of reporting on him, you know, that he's a pretty hot pickup and people think 2024 is going to be his big year, even though, I mean, he had a pretty good year last year and he already kind of a breakout. People seem to be saying this is the year of Royce, but I still would have a lot of trouble going for him just based on that kind of injury and that it's happened twice now.
Yeah, he was in consideration for me too. That he's going so high in drafts. He's 46th right now. I'm looking at ADP in NFBC drafts since the beginning of the year, and that's the sixth third baseman off the board too. So third basemen go very early, and it really bottoms out after Royce Lewis too. So like, if he runs into an injury, he's going to be tough to replace. But it is really tempting because he looked so good in the box last year when he was playing.
Yeah, he really did. I agree. It is hard to sort of overlook. I know as I was thinking about this pick, I was kind of like, and then I was like, no, because no matter what, I can see it happening. Hopefully it doesn't though. And then I think, you know, he missed a few more weeks last season with oblique injuries, which a ton of people did. That seemed to be a big bug last season. And then also some hamstring issues, which again, I mean, it seems like that was going around in general. But yeah, I think between all of those issues, yeah, it scares me.
Yeah, and concerning because those are soft tissue and not like freak accidents the way his ACL injuries were.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, he stays healthy and can have that. But can serve as somebody's top third baseman this year. But TBD. Was there anybody else you could think of, or that as we were having this conversation stood out to you?
I was trying to identify people on our socks, but it's really tough to like want to draft any of them, injury risk or not. So, I mean, obviously Eloy is here too, but the overall draft data is putting Eloy down there, that the risk is priced in. So everybody I think is out on Eloy. He just doesn't play and he's turning into DH only. And as you and I know, he doesn't like to stretch and just has all sorts of other strange quirks about him that I'm not sure like what his approach is overall. But he would be maybe like the other guy that I was considering, along with, Yohan Moncada is obviously up there, and I would say maybe Dylan Cease. Like, he seems due for something, but I don't know if Dylan
Yeah.
Cease will be on this White Sox roster when the opening day hits.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up Moncada. I mean, obviously, we're going to be very biased thinking about the Sox, but the first thing I initially wrote under this was like, don't fall for Moncada, because it seems like many seasons, if not every season, he'll start to kind of pick up, and everybody's like, this is the year. And then it's like, don't do it. It's not happening. So, yeah, I definitely think it's hilarious you brought that up.
I would be
yeah,
willing to see another Yohan Moncada album and music video. Like, that's
right.
what I'm here for.
Dude, that's where your bread is buttered. Know that. We want more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I want them to be more outlandish. I want them to be more colorful, more chains, more the horns, the burr 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 burr. Just all the way on.
Yeah. Yeah, the little like onesie thing, more of that. He should just play in that. They should just let him. I mean, they let the White Sox played in shorts. Why not bring it back?
I forgot about the onesie. The mental image is great.
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, brief time in history for us. But that'll be for a completely different podcast about baseball fashion or baseball music or anything that's not about healthy, good baseball. I agree with you though. I kind of actually thought about Cease too, and then I had this feeling in my head like, oh, him, but I was like, no, he hasn't really had that much happen. But then again, I think it might be a way to sort of explain away his issues from last year. But yeah, I don't think he'll be on the Sox longer anyway.
Yeah. The other one is Kopech too. And obviously, this is another, I mean, there's so much mismanagement on the White Sox that we could go forever, but he battled that knee injury last year and it never seemed to ever heal. And I doubt it's healed. And on top of it, people aren't in on Kopech. I think they've seen through what he is. And if he does maybe convert to the bullpen, that's when I would start thinking about him. But until Michael Kopech kind of comes full circle and realizes that's his true calling, it's just going to be a no for me every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Same kind of thing. It's like you see occasionally it's like, here he comes. And it's like, just kidding. No, not really. He's not coming. I think they haven't been a White Sox, but I know, we picked up Michael Soroka.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if I butchered his name, from Atlanta. That's one too that I've seen people kind of discuss, like maybe might be a good pickup because he's likely going to get more playing time than he ever had at Atlanta. Well, especially between being injured and then just like last year having a really rough season. I won't believe that until I see it, but that was something interesting that I saw kind of floating around out there. But again, that's another one where it's like he's just had so many injuries, injuries while getting over injuries that it's pretty scary. But who knows? Maybe that'll change. And you heard it here first.
Yeah, maybe not with the White Sox medical staff, but
yeah, I read an article that was about him that was basically talking about the same thing I just mentioned. Like, his numbers might be better because he gets more playing time, but it also said like the context is worse. And I was like, yeah, you don't even know. Well, I guess moving into a bit of a happier note, maybe a slightly more useful, are there any players that you picked up last year, maybe to cover a player on the IL on your roster, or it could even be one that you didn't pick up, but you think we got to see a little bit of because they did play because someone else was injured? Is there anyone like that you're kind of thinking about picking up again, whether that is for, like a regular starter or just somebody for your bench?
Yeah, and this is the guy who covered for all those injured folks up in Minnesota between Buxton, Jorge Polanco, Kirilloff, Kepler, I think, was even out for a
Oh my
bit.
God.
So, I mean, Gallo was out. So, like, yeah, we could go on and on. But that's Willi Castro, who should be eligible at third base and outfield in all leagues and might have second base eligibility depending on your league. He's plays all over, great utility man. He's got a little bit of pop. So, in 409 plate appearances last year, he hit 9 homers. But the big calling card here is his 33 stolen bases that he accumulated last year in that playing time. I think he's a great
Huge.
late pick because he's the perfect bench piece to be able to cover third base, corner, outfield, and hopefully MI second base, shortstop if he can pick that up in season,
Yeah.
which is certainly possible given that Minnesota still got a lot of those injured guys hanging around. So I really like Willie Castro to be able to sub in that he honestly should get 5 to 6 games a week just playing all around the field. He's going super late, pretty much free in drafts. And stolen bases are a hot commodity with the new rules as we saw last year. And if you're looking for stolen bases late, I think Willie Castro could be one of your better shots.
Cool. Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of been a shifting field too. So that'll be nice to know. Um, I think for mine, I cheated here and went with 2. And I brought one of these guys up in your cards and categories podcast. So last year, I think I got in a situation. I always have the worst luck with pitchers. And that was a time where I picked up the Tigers' Will Vest, who I mentioned in your podcast, and had a good experience with him. I think, as I mentioned, when the White Sox played the Tigers, there were a few guys that I was like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. They don't even have, like, I think a lot of their starters or their relievers and starters all across the board were out at the time. So it's like, who have they got? And I think Will Vest was one that I was like, okay, he showed me. But him and I think Jason Foley are both players that I think, people know who they are, but I think there are other sort of shinier pickups that people might be looking at. But they both had under 3 ERAs. Foley had 7 saves. So I think for them, that's somebody I will probably return to this year unless anything happens. God, really. God forbid that anything happens, and willing that they'll be there. But yeah, I looked at this and I was, I've seen them all over the place, especially Will Vest on ADP. I think right now they have them at like 686.
Yeah, super late, I would imagine.
Yeah, so he's possibly still going to be there, just regular availability to drop and pick up. Jason Foley's like 551. So yeah, I think those are ones that are pretty reliable and based on last year did pretty well that I would return to for sure this year. Yeah, excited to see how they do.
Yeah, I think those are great picks. Did you have any other backups?
Most of the ones I used last year were sort of out of the AL Central. I did pick up Willi Castro last year, mainly for the utility function, because that's usually where I get into an issue where it's like I just need somebody that I can put in anywhere. I actually didn't know that about the saves, so now I'm like, okay, good. That's because I didn't really pay attention to him that much. So I thought that was a really good pick. Yeah. What about you?
I'm going to say something positive about a White Sox player, and that is Gregory Santos subbing in for Liam Hendriks last year. Showed that he can handle the closer role. Should be the closer for the Sox breaking camp. I'm not sure how many saves you'll get out of him, but I think he's a good back end closer that will continue in that role. And I don't think anybody else in that bullpen is going to really challenge him because it's a pretty bad bullpen.
It is bad. And I do remember last year and I feel like he also was sort of understandably, I mean, losing Liam Hendriks and everything else that was going on with the White Sox is like devastating, so, and you're not really thinking of anybody else, I guess. But yeah, I feel like he was slept on a little, which makes sense. I think at some point, and I don't know, I mean, I think he had like top 4-3 WAR on the team, which is telling, honestly, but
from still, like a middle reliever. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was like, what is happening? I think it was some point Tim Anderson was like literally last or second to last or something like that.
Yeah.
And Gregory Santos was like third or fourth, and it's very weird. Very weird time. But yeah, I love that pick. Cool. Well, I think that kind of finishes up for us on this. Thank you so much for joining me. And do you want to share where you're at, where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at mcool7 on Twitter/X while it's still around. And I'm on Blue Sky at the same handle as well. So looking forward to people migrating over there over time. I'm writing on Razzball. So once the season kicks off, I'll be doing that waiver wire column on Saturdays again. But you can also find me. Yeah, yeah, it takes a lot of practice. You can find me every week doing Cards and Categories podcasts. So Jeremy Brewer and I are on that, and we're in the middle of our preseason previews right now and having different guests. You were on last week and did a fantastic job covering the AL Central with us. So yeah, we're looking forward to kicking off the season, and I'm ready for baseball for sure.
That's good. I'm glad you're positive. And I am too. So yeah, I'll you can find all of his info in the article. So you can go click and go make sure you follow podcast, follow Waiver Wire, although hopefully you already do. But yeah, thanks, and looking forward to a wonderful 2024 season with everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for having me on.